You have defied the natural order. Nwanyị, you sought to bend men to your will and hoarded wealth without gratitude. Why should I show you mercy? In the remote village of Odomo lived a young woman named Nwanyị. She was poor, and her life was one of constant struggle. Each day, Nwanyị would walk through the dusty parts of the village, gathering firewood and selling small items to make ends meet. She was often ridiculed by the wealthier women in the village, who looked down on her shabby clothes and barefooted appearance. But despite her hardship, Nwanyị remained determined, always hoping for a better future. Little did she know, her fate was about to change in the most unexpected way. One fateful afternoon, while fetching water from the river, Nwanyị encountered an old woman sitting by the river bank. The woman had a mysterious aura about her, with deep wrinkles and a silver hair that seemed to glisten within the sun. Nwanyị, come here, the old woman beckoned. Curious, Nwanyị approached cautiously. The old woman smiled and handed her a small golden calabash. This is no ordinary calabash, she whispered. It will supply you with endless wealth, but be wise with it. Nwanyị stared in disbelief. Her heart raced with excitement. She thanked the woman profusely, unaware of the consequences that would follow. With the golden calabash in her possession, Nwanyị's life changed overnight. As the old woman promised, the calabash produced money endlessly, filling her once empty home with wealth beyond imagination. She bought fine clothes, beautiful jewelries, and built the biggest house in Udumo. The villagers who once mocked her now envied her newfound fortune. Nwanyị became a topic of gossip in the village markets, where the women spoke in hushed tones about her sudden rise to riches. As her wealth grew, so did her ego. Nwanyị no longer greeted her old friends, nor did she associate with the poor. She began to see herself as untouchable, someone who was above the rules of the village. Even the village elders, including Ezeaku, the chief of the village, were in awe of her affluence. Nwanyị had power, and she knew it. But with great power came greater ambition, and soon she set her sights on something that would shock the entire village. She wanted to take over the role of a husband in her home. Nwanyị's bold ambition was unheard of in Udumo. Traditionally, men were the heads of households, providing for their families and taking wives. But Nwanyị, blinded by her wealth, believed that she could rewrite the rules. If men can take many wives, why can't I take many husbands? She questioned defiantly. Her first husband, Ugolino, was a quiet farmer who initially married her out of love. But soon, Nwanyị took a second husband, Obadima, a well-known hunter in the village. The men were baffled but stayed, attracted by the financial security her wealth provided. Before long, Nwanyị had married over 10 men, each vying for her attention and the privileges that came with being part of her household. The other villagers were scandalized. How could a woman take a role of a man, marrying multiple husbands and dictating the affairs of her home? The elders called several meetings, hoping to intervene, but Nwanyị was unmoved. I have wealth and power, she told them. I will do as I please. Her words only deepened the villagers' disdain, and there was little they could do. As time passed, Nwanyị became known as the wealthiest woman in the entire region. Her house, the largest in Udumo, was filled with luxurious imported silk, gold ornaments, and a fleet of servants. People from surrounding villages heard of her and traveled just to watch a glimpse of her grand lifestyle. She became a queen in her own right, though not in name but in influence. Her husbands, all numbering close to 20 by now, lived comfortably under her roof, with some even abandoning their own families to serve her. Nwanyị had successfully reversed the role of tradition, making herself the head of the household and her husbands mere subjects of her whims. However, the village elders grew more concerned with each passing day. Ezeaku the chief warned that Nwanyị was challenging not just the traditions of the land, but the will of the gods themselves. But Nwanyị dismissed such concerns, claiming that her wealth and the golden calabash made her untouchable. Yet, deep within her growing fortune, the seeds of greed and arrogance began to take root. Nwanyi's marriages continued to multiply. By the time she had reached her 100th husband, the village could hardly believe what was happening. Many of these men married her not out of love, but out of a desire for financial security. They saw her as a ticket to a comfortable life, with no work required and endless riches at their disposal. The power dynamics of her home shifted as the men grew increasingly complacent, relying solely on her wealth for their survival. In the eyes of the villagers, Nwanyị had become a legend, a woman who defied all odds and traditions. Some admired her audacity, while others were disgusted by her blatant disregard for customs that had been in place for generations. But for Nwanyị, it was simple. She had wealth, and wealth was power. And with that power, she believed she could bend the world to her will. As Nwanyi's marriages increased, so did her reliance on the golden calabash. Every morning, she would sit in front of the sacred objects, watching as it miraculously pours out coins, jewelries, and valuables. Her husbands no longer concerned themselves with farming, hunting, or trading. They lounged about her mansion, waiting for her to distribute the riches the calabash provided. But with the calabash endless gifts came a dark cloud of greed that hung over the household. Nwanyi's obsession of wealth made her more demanding of her husbands. She dictated their every move, choosing who would sleep in her chambers each night and sending others off to menial tasks. Those who disobeyed her commands were cast aside, replaced by new men eager for the luxury of her home. Despite their growing numbers, Nwanyị showed no sign of slowing down. She reveled in the fact that she now had over 150 husbands and her power knew no limits. The more wealth she gained, the more husbands she desired. The elders of Udumo, led by Ezeaku, grew increasingly alarmed at Nwanyi's actions. Never before had a woman amassed such power, and a flagrant disregard for tradition threatened the village's way of life. This is not the way of our ancestors, Udumiri, one of the senior elders, remarked during a council meeting. She mocks the gods with her behavior, and soon they will punish us all for allowing it. But despite the elders' concerns, they were powerless to act. Nwanyi's wealth has silenced many of the villagers who either feared or admired her. The younger men, in particular, saw her as an opportunity, flocking to her household in hopes of becoming one of her husbands. Nwanyị, meanwhile, grew more dismissive of the elders' warnings. "Let the gods come," she said arrogantly. "I have wealth to protect me." By the time Nwanyị married her 200th husband, her household had become a chaotic web of men vying for her attention and favor. Some of her husbands, like Jisike and Obidima, tried to outdo one another with gifts, hoping to gain special privileges. Others simply sat back, content with their position in a sprawling estate, where they had food, drinks, and comfort in abundance. Nwanyị was now a symbol of wealth and power throughout the region, and men from faraway villages came in hopes of being chosen as her next husband. But the dynamic was far from peaceful. The men grew envious of one another, and fights often broke out among them. Nwanyị, however, cared little of their bickering. As long as the golden calabash continued to supply her with riches, she felt invisible. Her only desire was to increase her collection of husbands, believing that each one added to her growing status and power. As Nwanyị's household grew, so did the tension among her husbands. Many of them began plotting against one another, forming alliance to win her favor. Jessica, one of her loyal husbands, led a group of men who sought to control the distribution of wealth within the household. Meanwhile, Obidinma led another faction that believed Nwanyị's power should be shared more equally among the men. The rivalry between these factions escalated, causing frequent disputes within the household. Despite the brewing chaos, Nwanyị remained unfazed. She saw herself as the ultimate authority, and as long as the golden calabash continued to provide, she believed she had nothing to fear. However, beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form in her once impenetrable empire. The village chief, Eziako, finally decided to confront Nwanyị directly. Accompanied by the other elders, he visited her grand estate to deliver a stern warning. Nwanyị, you are defying the very order of nature, he told her. The gods do not look kindly upon those who challenge their will. You must return to the ways of our ancestors or face the consequences. But Nwanyị only laughed. Ha 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 ha. I have more wealth than the entire village combined. Eziako, I am beyond the reach of the gods. Her words shocked the elders, but they could do little to sway her. As they left, Eziako shook his head in sorrow, knowing that Nwanyị's downfall was inevitable. Among all her husbands, there was one who stood above the rest, Odenigbo. He was a charming and handsome man, with a sharp mind and a way with words. Nwanyị favored him greatly, often offering him with gifts and privileges that the other husbands could only dream of. Odenigbo seemed different from the others. He didn't fight or bicker for Nwanyị's attention, but instead remained calm and patient, knowing that his charm had already won her heart. But while Nwanyị doted on Odenigbo, he had his own secret ambitions. He saw the golden calabash not as a symbol of power, but as a key to freedom. If he could get his hands on it, he would no longer need to rely on Nwanyị or any other woman for wealth. One night, as Nwanyị slept soundly in her chambers, Odenigbo quietly crept into the room where the golden calabash was kept. He had spent weeks planning his move, studying the routines of the servants and other husbands to ensure he could not be caught. With a swift of hand, he grabbed the calabash and made his way out of the estate, fleeing into the darkness of the night. By the time Nwanyị awoke, it was too late. The calabash was gone, and so was Odenigbo. Panic spread through the household as Nwanyị's husbands realized the source of their wealth had disappeared. Nwanyị was devastated, not just by the loss of the calabash, but by the betrayal of the one husband she had trusted the most. Without the golden calabash, Owen's empire began to crumble. The endless wealth that had once flowed into her household dried up, and the luxuries she had surrounded herself with quickly disappeared. Her husbands, who had once been so eager to marry her for financial security, began to abandon her one by one. Some left quietly, while others demanded compensation for their time spent in her service. Nwanyị, who had once stood as the pinnacle for wealth and power, now found herself alone in a crumbling mansion. The villagers who had once envied her now pitied her. The elders who had warned her of her downfall watched as their predictions came true. Nwanyị was not one to give up easily. She sent out messengers to track down Odenigbo and retrieve the stolen calabash. For weeks, her men scoured the region, asking about the whereabouts of the traitor. But Odenigbo had vanished without a trace, leaving behind no clues as to where he had gone. Frustrated and desperate, Nwanyị turned to the village elders for help. Though they had warned her of the consequences of her actions, they agreed to assist her in her search, hoping to restore balance to the village. But as the search continued, it became clear that Odenigbo was not just a man who had stolen a calabash. He had outsmarted them all. As the days turned into weeks, Nwanyị found herself increasingly isolated. Without the golden calabash, her once opulent estate fell into disrepair. Her husbands, who had married her for wealth and luxury, left her one after the other. Ndiyocha, her last remaining servant, was the only person who stayed, though even she seemed reluctant. "What will I do now, Ndi?" Nwanyị asked one evening, her voice heavy with despair. "I had everything, and now it's all gone." Ndiyocha shook her head solemnly. "The gods do not favor those who disrespect their laws," she replied. "You defied our traditions, and now the balance has been restored." Though Nwanyị wanted to argue, deep down, she knew that her servant was right. The riches and wealth had gone to her head, and she had lost herself in the pursuit of control over men. Now she had nothing. As words of Nwanyị's downfall spread throughout Udumo, the villagers became more vocal in their disapproval of her. They mocked her openly in the marketplace, calling her the woman with too many husbands and the queen of nothing. Women who had once envied her beauty and wealth now looked at her with pity, while the men who had once courted her turned away in disgust. Ezekiel and the other elders made it clear that Nwanyị's behavior had been an affront of village customs, and they did little to protect her from the scorn of the people. The only kindness they offered her was to allow her to continue living in her mansion. Though without wealth, it had become more of a burden than a privilege. Determined not to live in disgrace for the rest of her life, Nwanyị set out to find a way to redeem herself. She visited Ezekiel and the elders, seeking their guidance. "I have learnt my lessons," she said humbly. "Tell me what I must do to earn back the respect of the village and the gods." The elders looked at one another in silence before Ndiomiri spoke. "The gods are not easily swayed, Nwanyị. You must prove that you have truly changed." They instructed her to take a pilgrimage to the sacred mountain, Ogochekere, to seek the favor of the earth goddess. Only by humbling herself before the goddess would she hope to restore balance to her life. With nothing left to lose, Nwanyị began her journey to the sacred mountain. The path was treacherous, and she traveled alone, carrying only a small offering of yams and kola nuts for the earth goddess. As she climbed the mountains, memories of her past flooded her mind. The day she received the golden calabash, the joy of her first wealth, the overwhelming greed that had taken hold of her heart. She had been blinded by her fortune and had lost sight of what truly mattered. By the time she reached the top of Ogochekere, Nwanyị was exhausted. She knelt before the shrine of the earth goddess and laid her offerings on the ground. "I have wronged the gods and the people of my village," she whispered. "Please show me mercy." As Nwanyị prayed, a soft breeze stirred the leaves around her. The air grew thick with the presence of something powerful, and a voice echoed in her mind. "You have defied the natural order. Nwanyị, you sought to bend men to your will and hoarded wealth without gratitude. Why should I show you mercy?" Tears filled Nwanyị's eyes. "I was wrong," she admitted. "I see now that wealth does not make one invisible." I sought to control what was never mine to control. I asked for forgiveness, not for my wealth, but for peace in my heart. The voice was silent for a moment before it spoke again. You will never regain the riches you once had, but you will be given a second chance to live a life of humility and balance. With that, the present faded, and Nwanyị was left alone on the mountain. Nwanyị returned to the village a changed woman. She no longer held her head high with pride, but walked humbly. Though Nwanyị had made peace with her past, she still wondered about the fate of Odenigbo, the husband who had betrayed her and stolen the golden calabash. Rumors circulated in the village that he had been seen in distant lands, living a life of luxury. But as time passed, these rumors faded, and no one could say for sure what had become of him. Some said that the gods had cursed him for his greed, while others believed he had squandered the wealth and was living in hiding. Nwanyị no longer cared. She focused on her new life, and she had no desire to seek revenge or reclaim what was lost. The end. Thank you guys for watching. Please support this small channel by liking this video and hitting the subscribe button. Thank you so much for your support.